With everything going on in the world right now, it's hard not to wonder if we're really ready for whatever might be coming next.
Right.
It's a question that I think a lot of people are asking these days.
I think
And
so.
it's fascinating to see how some countries are taking some very concrete steps to address it.
Absolutely.
We've got Germany and the Nordic countries are
Yeah.
really kind of ramping up their efforts
Yeah.
to prepare their citizens for potential conflicts. And
What's really interesting about this is that we get to look at this from two different angles, right? We've got these official publications from governments outlining steps to take,
right.
but we also have these public online forums where people are reacting and responding to these initiatives.
Interesting.
So it gives us this much more well-rounded and complete understanding of
Yeah.
how this is all playing out.
It's like we get to see the official strategy
Yeah.
and the on-the-ground reaction
Exactly.
at the same time. So let's start with what's actually happening. Sweden, for example, has distributed this 32-page pamphlet called If Crisis or War Comes.
Yes, and it really is comprehensive. It covers everything from finding air raid shelters and ensuring digital security to even addressing basic needs like sanitation if water systems are disrupted.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's pretty intense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing Sweden isn't the only country taking these steps.
Not at all, no. Norway has sent a similar booklet to 2.6 million households, and that booklet focuses on preparedness for various crises, including war.
It seems like a pretty clear message.
It is.
What sorts of specific recommendations are they giving people? We talking full-on prepping here?
There are some familiar prepper elements to it.
Yeah.
They're advising people to have things like water non-perishable food blankets, a battery-powered radio, and cash on hand.
So if the power goes out, you can at least stay warm,
Yes.
fed and informed.
Keep up with what's happening.
Makes sense. What about Finland? I understand they're taking a more digital approach.
They've got this online guide called Preparing for Incidents and Crises, and they also have a website called 72tuntia.fi, which challenges people to think about their 72-hour survival skills.
So it's less about handing out physical pamphlets and more about getting people to engage with the concept online.
Exactly.
What about Germany? They're doing something with bunkers, right?
Germany is in a unique position. They're concerned about a lack of adequate public bunker capacity. So they're developing this bunker location app, and they're encouraging citizens to prepare their own shelters.
Wow. So it's interesting how each country is tailoring its approach
Yes.
based on its own infrastructure and existing resources.
Yeah.
But why now? What's driving this sudden wave of war preparedness initiatives?
You really can't ignore the context here. The war in Ukraine has fundamentally shifted the security landscape in Europe, particularly in the Baltic region, and countries that once felt relatively secure are now reassessing their vulnerabilities.
It's a stark reminder that war,
Yeah.
while unthinkable for many, is
For a lot of people,
a very real possibility.
it is.
And it's not just about military strength.
No.
It's also about the resilience of society as a whole.
Absolutely. These preparedness efforts are as much about psychological readiness as they are about physical supplies. It's about fostering a sense of self-reliance and community support in the face of a potential crisis.
That makes a lot of sense. But I have to wonder, doesn't this kind of messaging also have the potential to create anxiety?
Oh, absolutely.
Especially for people who have already experienced the trauma of war.
For sure.
One of the articles we have highlights the story of a Swedish healthcare worker who lived through the war in Somalia.
Yes.
And she talks about how these preparedness campaigns brought back a lot of really difficult memories for her.
Yeah, her story is a really powerful reminder that we need to approach this issue with sensitivity. While it's essential to prepare for these potential threats, we also need to be mindful of the impact these efforts can have on individuals, particularly those who've already faced trauma.
So it's a delicate balance.
It is.
It seems like navigating that balance is going to be crucial.
Definitely.
So we've talked about what governments are doing,
Yeah.
but I'm curious to know how the public is responding to all of this.
Yeah.
Let's dive into that Reddit forum discussion and see what people are saying.
Okay, sounds good. This is where we really get to see the diversity of opinions and understand how these initiatives are being received at a grassroots level. Some people are fully embracing the advice, seeing it as a practical and necessary precaution regardless of the specific threat.
Right, so that's the better safe than sorry approach.
Exactly. And then you have others who are much more critical. They view it as fear-mongering or an unnecessary escalation of anxieties.
So there's a real spectrum of opinions here,
Yes.
with some seeing it as a vital wake-up call and others seeing it as an overreaction.
You're right.
And some are pointing out that certain countries, particularly Finland, already have a strong culture of preparedness built in.
That's a really good point. Finland's historical context and geopolitical situation have made preparedness a way of life for decades. So for them, this might feel like a continuation of existing practices rather than a dramatic shift.
Yeah, it's like a good place to delve a little deeper. This whole 72 hours concept that Finland emphasizes is intriguing. What's the significance of that time frame?
Well, the 72-hour time frame is a strategic concept. It underscores the importance of self-sufficiency in the initial stages of a crisis. The idea is that in the immediate aftermath of a disaster, whether it's a natural disaster, a cyber attack, or a war, it may take time for emergency services to mobilize and provide aid.
So it's about bridging that gap and ensuring that people can take care of themselves and their families
Exactly.
during those critical first few days.
Right. Having enough food, water, shelter, and essential supplies to get through that initial period is crucial. It not only enhances individual survival, but it also gives emergency responders the time they need to assess the situation and respond effectively.
Yeah. And someone in the forum brought up an interesting point about how cyber attacks on critical infrastructure
Oh, yeah.
could also lead to a situation where this kind of preparedness becomes really crucial.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about preparing for traditional warfare anymore.
No, the world is increasingly interconnected, and that means the potential for disruption is also more complex and far-reaching. A cyber attack on power grids, communication systems, or financial institutions could have these cascading effects leading to widespread chaos and a need for self-sufficiency.
So it's like the lines between different types of threats are blurring,
They are.
and preparedness needs to adapt to this new reality. So for you listening right now, does this make you think about your own level of preparedness? What steps could you take, even small ones, to feel more confident in handling an unexpected situation?
It's not about panicking or becoming overwhelmed. It's about taking practical steps to empower yourself. What are some things you could do within your own means and circumstances to feel a little more prepared and in control? Maybe it's something as simple as putting together a basic emergency kit or having a plan for how to connect with loved ones if communication systems go down.
It seems like even small steps can make a big difference in terms of feeling more secure and resilient.
Absolutely. It's about progress, not perfection. Any step you take towards preparedness is a step in the right direction.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground here, from government initiatives and public reactions to the psychology of preparedness and the 72-hour rule.
And this is really just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to explore when it comes to understanding and embracing the concept of preparedness in our complex and ever-changing world.
And explore we shall. But first, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about the practical steps and the potential anxieties, but I'm curious to explore the deeper philosophical implications of all of this. What does this push for war preparedness tell us about our values and priorities as a society? We'll delve into that right after this.
Okay.
Quick break.
It's easy to get caught up in the logistics of, gathering supplies and making plans.
Right.
But I think it's important to take a step back and consider the broader societal shifts
Okay.
that these preparedness efforts might actually reflect.
Okay.
For decades, the emphasis in many developed countries has been on individual rights and freedoms.
Right. But now it seems like there's this renewed focus on collective responsibility.
Yes.
This idea that we need to be able to rely on each other when things get tough.
Exactly. These campaigns seem to suggest a shift in thinking.
Right.
A recognition that individual well-being is really intertwined with the resilience of the community. As a whole, we can't just rely on institutions like governments to come in and save the day. There's the shared responsibility to be prepared and to support ourselves and our neighbors.
So it's not just about having a stockpile of food and water.
Yeah,
It's about cultivating a mindset of preparedness,
it is.
both individually and as a society.
Exactly. It's about fostering those qualities of adaptability and problem solving and community support
Right.
that enable us to weather the storms, both literal and metaphorical.
Makes you wonder if these war preparedness campaigns are actually part of a much larger trend,
Yes.
like a response to a growing awareness of the interconnected challenges that we face as a global society.
It's a really compelling thought. We're living in an era that's defined by these complex and interconnected threats, from climate change to potential pandemics to economic instability. These challenges transcend national borders, and they require a different kind of preparedness, one that emphasizes things like collaboration, resource sharing, and a recognition of our shared vulnerabilities.
So maybe these war preparedness efforts are just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
They're raising awareness about the need for resilience on a much broader scale.
Absolutely.
prompting us to think about how we can build stronger, more adaptable communities.
It's not just about reacting to crises after they occur.
Right.
It's about proactively building that resilience into the fabric of our society.
I see.
It's about investing in infrastructure, strengthening social safety nets, and fostering a sense of collective purpose.
But I have to ask, are pamphlets and bunker apps really enough?
Yeah.
I mean, are these efforts truly going to make a difference if a major crisis does hit?
It's really impossible to predict the future or guarantee outcomes, but I think what's perhaps more important is the conversation that these efforts are sparking.
Okay.
They're prompting us to confront these uncomfortable truths about our own vulnerabilities and to consider what we can do to prepare both individually and collectively.
So it's not about instilling fear or promoting some kind of doomsday mentality.
No.
It's about encouraging people to think critically about potential risks
It is.
and take ownership of their own preparedness.
It's about shifting from a mindset of complacency to a mindset of empowerment. And that shift can have ripple effects that extend far beyond the immediate threat of war. It can inspire us to build more resilient communities, strengthen social bonds, and cultivate a spirit of collective action.
That's a powerful message.
Yeah.
So let's get practical for a moment for those listening who are thinking, okay, I need to get more prepared. Where do they even begin? What are the most crucial first steps?
I think a great place to start is with just a simple assessment of your current situation. Take stock of what you already have. Identify any potential gaps and think about your biggest concerns.
So it's about taking a personalized approach,
Yes.
recognizing that preparedness looks different for everyone,
It does.
depending on their circumstances and their resources.
Exactly. And it's important to emphasize that preparedness doesn't have to be this overwhelming or expensive endeavor.
Right.
You can start small and gradually build up your resources and your skills over time.
So it's about progress, not perfection, right?
Absolutely. Every step you take, no matter how small, contributes to a greater sense of self-reliance and resilience.
Okay, so we've talked about the big picture, the philosophical implications, and the importance of a personalized approach. But I'm eager to dive into some more specific, actionable tips
Okay.
that people can use to build their own preparedness plans. We'll get into all of that right after this.
Yeah.
All right, let's get down to brass tacks. If someone's listening and thinking, okay, I need to get more prepared, what are the must-haves
Okay.
in any good preparedness kit?
Well, you always want to start with the essentials. You know, the things you need for basic survival.
Okay,
Water, food, shelter, and warmth.
right.
So think about having a good supply of bottled water and non-perishable food items, and make sure they're things that you'll actually enjoy eating.
Yeah, that's important.
You know, and blankets and warm clothing are crucial.
Right.
And if you live in a colder climate, a camping stove or an alternative heating source. Right.
Could be a good idea.
So having a plan for staying warm is essential,
It is.
especially if a crisis disrupts power supplies. What about other tools or supplies? Are there any that stand out as particularly important?
Well, a battery-powered radio is essential for staying informed
Okay.
if the power goes out. So you'll want to be able to get updates and emergency broadcasts. And of course, a well-stocked first aid kit
Right.
is a must-have.
Those all seem like pretty obvious choices, but what about things that people might overlook?
Well, I think a lot of people don't always consider their finances and communication.
Yeah.
So it's a good idea to have some cash on hand because, ATMs and card readers might not be working during a crisis.
Right.
And having a backup communication plan is also important.
Okay.
If cell service is disrupted, do you have another way to contact loved ones or emergency services?
Right. So a landline could suddenly become very valuable if cell towers are down.
Yeah, exactly.
And what about important documents? Do people have copies of those on hand as well? Absolutely. Keeping copies of crucial documents, things like passports, birth certificates, insurance policies, and medical records, either in a secure physical location or digitally, that can save you a lot of headaches later on.
Right. I know this can all seem like a lot to manage.
Yeah.
Where do you even begin to store all of this stuff?
Well, I think the key is to start small and prioritize.
Okay.
Focus on gathering those most essential items first.
Right.
And then you can gradually build your kit over time. And remember, it's all about personalization.
Okay.
Your kit should reflect your individual needs.
So if you have pets or specific medical needs, factor those in as well.
Exactly. If you have pets, make sure they're included in your plan, food, water, any necessary medications.
Okay.
And if you rely on prescription medications, having an extra supply on hand is always a good idea.
Good point. And speaking of supplies,
Hmm.
it's crucial to check those expiration dates regularly.
Yeah,
You don't want to
absolutely.
find yourself with a stash of expired food or medications when you need them most.
No, not at all. It's also a good idea to think beyond supplies and consider developing some basic survival
Like
skills.
learning how to build a fire or purify water or administer basic first aid.
Yeah, those are all great examples.
Yeah.
Having those skills can really boost your confidence and self-sufficiency in a crisis. And you'd be surprised how many resources are available to learn these skills both online and within your community.
Yeah, and you know what? Learning those skills can actually be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
It's like tapping into a sense of resourcefulness and resilience that we may have kind of lost touch with in
absolutely.
our modern lives.
Reconnecting with those practical skills that our ancestors relied on,
Right.
it can be a really empowering experience.
So we've covered a lot of really practical advice.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier,
Yeah.
this idea that these war preparedness efforts are part of a much larger trend
Yeah.
towards building more resilient societies.
Yeah.
But here's a question that keeps coming back to me. Given how interconnected our world is, are these efforts ultimately a local or a global issue?
That's a really important question. And I think, on one hand, preparedness often starts at the local level.
Oh,
It's about individuals, families, and communities taking steps to protect themselves.
right.
But in an increasingly interconnected world, where crises can easily transcend national borders,
Right.
I think a purely local approach just isn't sufficient anymore.
So when we're talking about global challenges like pandemics
Right.
or climate change or large-scale conflicts,
Yeah.
it's clear that international cooperation becomes really essential.
Absolutely. We need to be sharing information and resources and expertise. We need to coordinate our efforts and support each other because at the end of the day, we're all facing these challenges together.
It's a stark reminder that global preparedness is not just about altruism.
No.
It's about recognizing that our own well-being is really interconnected
It is.
with the well-being of others around the world.
A threat to one nation can quickly become a threat to all. So building resilience on a global scale is not just a moral imperative.
Right.
It's also a matter of, enlightened self-interest.
Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground in this deep dive,
We have.
from very practical tips for building a preparedness kit to exploring the deeper philosophical and global implications of this trend.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation.
We'll be sure to include links to all of the resources that we've mentioned, including those government pamphlets, websites, and even that bunker app for anyone who's feeling particularly adventurous.
Yeah, for those who want to go the extra mile.
And remember, even the smallest step towards preparedness is a step in the right direction.
It is.
It's about empowering yourself, building resilience, and fostering a sense of community in a world that increasingly demands it.
Well said.
So stay curious, stay informed, and stay prepared until next time. Keep diving deep